You're working in a system built for men, where speed is prioritized over listening, and efficiency means cutting patients short. The burden of extra work, the unpaid hours, the impossible expectations, they're not in your head, they're backed by data. Today, we get to the root of a pattern many women physicians feel but rarely discuss: gender bias for female physicians. I am joined by Dr. Noemi Adame, who will share the story behind her viral article that discusses the nitty-gritty data that explains the disproportionate experience between male and female physicians. By the end of this conversation, you will feel validated and empowered. You will also be armed with real solutions to strengthen the way you practice medicine. Find the full transcript and bonus resources for physician moms at inspiredmommds.com/74. You're listening to the Inspired Mom MDs podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Cindy Van Prague. I help physician moms take back control of their time and energy so they can prioritize what matters most and thrive at work and home. In each episode, I bring honest conversations, inspiring stories, and practical strategies, including interviews with incredible women who are redefining success on their own terms. Let's dive in. Thank you for joining us today on the Inspired Mom MDs podcast. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Cindy Van Prague. I have a special guest today. She's waving hello already. Her name is Dr. Noemi Adame, also known as the Veggies Over Pills Doctor. She's a board-certified physician. She's a plant-based home cook, writer, holistic wellness advocate, and the owner of Culver Pediatric Center. That's an award-winning direct primary care clinic focusing on empowering and educating families and communities through nutrition and integrative health. Dr. Adame has additional training in lifestyle medicine and integrative care of neurodivergent children. She writes a regular wellness column in the Culver Citizen and is the author of Brain Boosters, which is a guide for supporting neurodiverse children through nourishment and holistic interventions. Beyond the exam room, Dr. Adame speaks out about gender biases in medicine and hosts wellness retreats for women physicians to help build and maintain joyful, sustainable, and burnout-proof practices. Welcome, Dr. Adame.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
It's so good to have you. So I usually start these interviews just with a quick icebreaker, something easy, I hope. My first question is, tell us something that's bringing you joy lately, either at work or outside of work. What's been lighting you up?
Well, I really am very excited about our Physician Women's Retreat. And my team and I have been doing the fun part of planning some of the details this week. You know, as doctors, we experience a lot of decision fatigue. So it's bringing me joy to make decisions about what to put in the swag bag and, what yoga instructor are we going to have join us and, planning the plant-based meals that we'll serve. And that is just a nice little break from the more emotionally intense decision making that I normally have to contend with as a physician.
So this retreat is a break for you and for all the women attending.
Right. Exactly.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the meat of the topic today, which is so fascinating. And I just want to say one thing I hear again and again from women physicians is this sense that they feel they have to do everything right. And that can be anything from being the perfect mom to showing up fully for patients to having all the charting done before they leave. And it just can feel like they're barely keeping up. And when we zoom out of this issue, we realize it's not just a personal struggle, but that it's a pattern. And patterns are usually backed by data, which brings me to your article that you wrote recently for SoMeDocs, which is a social media platform for physicians, which is fantastic. But anyway, you wrote this article and it's called Being a Female Doctor Isn't the Same Job. That's data. And it was wildly popular. And my question is, what inspired you to write that article in the first place?
First, I have been so humbled by the response of the SoMe Docs article, especially on Instagram where it's gone viral. It's content that's clearly resonating. And it wasn't just one thing that inspired me to write it. It was a lot of little things, the thoughts and feelings that I was finally able to put on paper have been percolating in me for years, really. When I was a hospitalist, and mind you, this was over 10 years ago, I conducted a study on family-centered rounds. And as part of my study, I rounded with all of my partners. And I definitely noticed a difference in the way patients and staff and even the residents and the medical students interacted with the male doctors compared to the female doctors, because I knew things that they did not. I felt that the higher respect and deference that my male colleagues received was not necessarily earned. And of course, I'm going to also have the little disclaimer that I have respect for all my male colleagues, right? We're just going to have to get real and focus on some of the studies and data for a little bit here. And fast forward to when I was in outpatient corporate medicine, I was just confused. I was confused as to why I was still in the office for hours after my male colleagues left. I felt that it was me, that I was too slow, I was just inefficient. And I actually asked for a time flow study from my employer. And the person who evaluated me said, she was an EHR super user, and she said I was very efficient. She even commented on my typing, that I typed very fast, that I spent considerable time prepping for visits, so that my visits, I wasn't like looking for information or trying to figure things. I walked into a visit prepared and streamlined. She said my notes were very thorough. So she actually advised my employer against getting me a scribe because she said that no scribe would be able to document to the level of detail and thoroughness that I was doing. So, and then fast forward in another venue, when I started my DPC practice, I realized very quickly that my female colleagues and I contended with issues that our male colleagues in direct primary care did not understand. So really it was across multiple practices, across multiple years, that really, and also some unsettling interactions with patients that left me with this feeling like there's something different. And so this is going to be a little hard. So the Sentinel event for me was when my mother died in 2023, really unexpectedly. And then 2 years later, my sisters and I are still shell shocked. Like, we still can't believe it. And she had a stroke, was in the ICU for 6 days before she succumbed. And during that time, I already owned my practice. I was literally my own boss. And I sat in the ICU watching her die for 6 days. And I was answering texts, and I was sending refills, and I was doing telehealth visits from the hospital bathroom. So in the aftermath of that trauma, I realized that there were not just systemic factors that made things different for female doctors, but internalized factors too. Because, you can take the girl out of academics, but you can't take the academics out of the girl. I was finally able to put pen to paper when I read the studies that I mentioned in the article that indicate that patients and staff indeed treat us differently. And that leads to more uncompensated work, more emotional labor, more burnout. And I didn't want to just bum everybody out with data, right? Yes, female doctors have a different job. Female doctors have more demands placed on them by staff and patients and all of that. I wanted to offer a solution. And that's where the idea of the Physician Women's Retreat came about. And I felt like I could write the article that was emotionally validating, had data to back it up, but I had a solution in hand with the retreat. And that's what finally made me write it.
So first off, my condolences for your mother. And second, I like the fact that you use the word percolate or percolated. Basically, this has been an ongoing pattern that is now becoming more clear for you, and you put pen to paper, and now you're showing it to other people with solutions.
Right.
So can you paint a picture of some of these differences? What would a typical workday look like for a female doctor compared to a male counterpart?
And of course, I'm going to answer as a physician because that's what I know. That's what I am. But honestly, I think that women who are listening, who are not physicians, can probably relate no matter what industry they're in. As women, our days typically start earlier. We are usually the ones getting the kids ready for school, packing lunches, carpooling, putting away the dishes from the night before. We were talking about our dogs earlier. We're the ones feeding and walking the dog, and maybe trying to get in a little bit of self-care before the rest of the household wakes up, because while my experience, not just with myself, but with friends and colleagues and family, while dad can sit on the couch and no one's bothering him, that's not the same thing with mom. So we do need to get our self-care in while the rest of the house is asleep. And then, of course, we get to work and face these challenges, many challenges as women, right? We have limited mentorship because the people in power are not necessarily people that can mentor us appropriately. And the gender biases that I mentioned in the article, we as physicians, and again, multiple studies have shown this, we have better patient outcomes. We are equally or more proficient in our jobs, but we are not afforded the same respect as our male colleagues by staff, by admin, by patients. And so we have this added burden and workload because it's this cognitive dissonance of we are seen as kinder and more approachable. So then we're given more tasks through the portal and other means, then add to our day without compensation and without a higher level of respect. And then, of course, we go home and start that second shift again with the home and childcare responsibilities that disproportionately fall on us for a lot of reasons. Some of them are self-imposed expectations. Our mothers did it, so we feel it's our job to do it. We have been socialized that it is our job to do these tasks. And in the same token, the male partners have been socialized that, it's the woman who does those things, right? And may not share the burden of the workload. I do want to say at this point that my husband does cook and clean, but regardless, there are still other things that I do that he doesn't, simply because I felt that it was my job as the mom or the wife to do, right? That had nothing to do with him, that has to do with me. And really, until we start having serious and honest conversations about this, it's never going to change. And we're going to continue to harm our female physician workforce without any changes.
You've talked a lot about different expectations, and you say some of it was me, some of it's just the outside expectation. It's almost like a double layer of expectations, internal and external.
Very
to tease those two apart, because these are so fascinating, because this is the root of what's going on here. What do you see as some of the biggest external pressures that women physicians can expect to face versus male?
As female doctors, we have to function in a system that rewards quantity or volume over quality, which is completely opposite of the way most of us practice. And again, this is based on the results of these studies. We are trying to function within a system that does not value the reasons that we have better outcomes, including the fact that we take more time with patients. We take more time to listen. We are more methodical with our note writing and order entry. The studies that I mentioned in the article all talk about this. So the corporate medical system rewards quantity and volume. They reward quick patient interactions that are meant to tick a box, and not patient interactions where, as physicians, we think or are allowed to think deeply about a patient that is highly unique and complex. They don't want us to do that, right? 10 minutes in and out. And the quantity of demands is higher on us too. One of the studies that I talk about in the article showed that female physicians get more portal messages from both 25% from staff and 25% from patients. So depending on the size of the panel, it can be 60 messages or more per month. And that adds up, right? Because answering a message isn't just answering a message. You have to look through the chart. You have to look, what did we do last time? What has been done before? It takes time to answer a message. And then there was that other study from this year that showed that not only do we experience more messages from patients and staff, but more negative and demeaning messages from patients. And that is a huge external pressure that causes us so much harm and affects our ability to fully do our job in a therapeutic and a positive way.
So their external pressures are both the systems and just how people are treating us.
Yeah.
Wow. And we will get to solutions in just a minute, but first let's
Yes,
cover, which I'm so thankful you have those today. So on the flip side, what would be some of the internal expectations? I know you mentioned earlier, that's what I expect of myself, but
Right. Yeah.
what does the data show?
I am the firstborn daughter of immigrants. So people pleasing is like my drug of choice. And, I'm in a lot of physician women's groups like on Facebook and other platforms. And we discuss this all the time. We are
Mhm.
socialized as women to
Mhm.
put the needs of others above ourselves, even if it means harm to us. In a previous article that I wrote, I talked about a study that showed that while women outlive men,
Mhm.
generally, that is not the case for female doctors. We do not have that longevity benefit over our male counterparts. Women in other high earning fields like engineering and law, they do outlive men as expected in the general population. But I really think that these external and internal factors are harming us. Our society glorifies the selfless woman who sacrifices all for their family, for their community. So if we fall even an inch short of that, we internalize that disappointment. And it's not even about being liked, it's more about letting people down. And in medicine, it's amplified even more because as doctors, we're just naturally altruistic, regardless of gender. I think as physicians, we have that, right? That's one of the many reasons we go into this field. And the system profits off of that. It profits off the altruism of physicians. It would not survive. The corporate medical system would not survive without doctors doing so much uncompensated work simply because we care about patients and we want to do the right
Mhm.
thing. So all of that is internalized and definitely adds to this invisible load that most people don't see.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. And that's fascinating that studies have actually shown that women physicians don't live as long
Mhm.
as their counterparts, but
Yeah.
lawyers and other high professional women do. Wow. Okay.
In stressful fields too.
Well, so now on to the good news and the
Yes,
solutions.
yes. Let's
Okay.
not bum everybody out.
Well,
Yeah.
yes. So the good news is that awareness of these things,
Yeah.
awareness of this data, and of what you're feeling is common to a lot of people, not just you, can open the door to change. And that once we see these patterns, we can start to shift the patterns. And there are different ways to do that. And you're gonna bring those up. So, whether it's mindset or boundaries or systems. And I'm so curious. So my first question about this one, maybe the solutions is
Mhm.
what mindset shifts or systems have been most impactful for women that maybe you've researched or seen in your personal life?
And I am going to talk about the one thing that makes the world go round, right?
Uh-huh.
And part of that is to remove stigma around discussions about money. We have to rethink compensation and pricing for female doctors to be able to practice the way that we do to have these better outcomes that we have. I'll talk about the corporate medical system first. The volume based RVU compensation model doesn't favor the way many women practice medicine because like we talked about, as female doctors, we prioritize quality, not just quantity. We spend more time with patients, but the corporate medical system rewards speed, not thoughtfulness. So I think outcome-based compensation and real outcomes, right? Not just ticking check boxes, but outcomes like clinical practice guideline adherence, reduced morbidity, improved patient health, like real solid outcomes and metrics. If compensation was based on that, then that would be more aligned with how many of us work. But that's just not the system that we're in, and I have no control over the corporate medical system, but I own my own practice. It's a direct care practice, and I do have control over my own practice. So in the
Mhm.
direct primary care model, we create our own compensation structure, right? We set our own price. And for me, that has meant pricing in a way that reflects the extra time that I spend with patients, the smaller panel size that I intentionally keep for quality of care, and the value of true continuity and accessibility, and my flexibility to hire a team to delegate tasks so that I can just focus on the things that cannot be delegated that I have to do as a doctor and I can't delegate to anyone else. And I have been criticized openly and quietly about my prices. I've been told that I'm not really DPC, that I'm concierge because of my price points. As a people pleaser, that whose default is to follow the rules, I have had to work very, very hard to overcome the guilt and the shame from that criticism. But a very thoughtful, critical financial analysis clearly indicated that for me to just survive as a small business at the level of care that I was delivering to my patients, we take care of very complex pediatric patients. We have families that travel from out of state to see us.
Mm.
And so I have had to price very differently than what the male, DPC founders were telling me to do, because I absolutely would not have survived if I was pricing the way that they were advising me. And I felt very uncomfortable, and I'm still uncomfortable. I don't know if you can tell, but I am uncomfortable talking about money. But I will shout past that discomfort, shout it from the rooftops, that we as women have to charge according to our value. And we underprice ourselves. And my advice is don't fall into that trap. Whether you're setting your own price structure at your own practice, when you are negotiating a contract with your employer, don't undervalue yourself. Be compensated for the work that you do. And then the other was mindset. In mindset, I usually talk about mindset first, but I think in this context, I wanted to talk about the money first, because if we do not compensate ourselves properly, then we will not survive, and then we can't help anyone. But mindset is also very important. Mind drama is a real anchor, even with the right systems. If your mindset is rooted in overfunctioning or guilt or perfectionism, then we're going to slip back into burnout. And if we create great systems, but we don't fix the mindset first, then we will sabotage the very systems that we created. I constantly have to check in with myself, especially in the uncomfortable situation where someone is pushing my boundaries. I have to ask myself, is this fair? Is this interaction fair? Am I being asked to give more time, more labor, sacrifice more time, in this interaction? I ask myself, am I going to apologize for things that don't require an apology? And I've even trained my staff, don't apologize for things that don't require an apology. For example, let's say that I'm running a few minutes late for an appointment. I don't apologize. Instead, I say, thank you for waiting. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for waiting. Because this acknowledges that person waited for me, that I do respect their time, but I'm not handing over my power. So not apologizing for things that don't need an apology is very important with mindset. And then the other mindset question to ask ourselves is, am I upholding my values and boundaries? Or am I sabotaging my own boundaries? Because if we sabotage our own boundaries, then you might as well not have the boundary. It's going to get pushed and pushed and pushed and into a never-ending cycle. And then the other is asking yourself, am I being truthful about what's sustainable? I definitely had to have a serious self-reflection a few years after I opened my practice, because the level of speed and service that I was able to deliver when I first opened up my practice was not sustainable. So we did have to make some changes. And, fortunately, our patients love us, our families love us. And, there were literally like 2 families that have been unhappy with some of the changes, but these universally applied rules are what are going to save us from burnout, because we're not reinventing the wheel and trying to make a decision with each time. And, mindset work isn't a one and done. It's daily. When combining it with the right pricing, with systems and structure, you can build a practice and a life that's joyful and sustainable.
Mm-hmm. I like that you started with the elephant in the room, which is money. Yeah. And the stigma around talking about money and valuing yourself. And no, I didn't see any hesitancy in the way you explained that. I saw a lot of confidence. I saw your boundaries, shout it from the rooftop. Yes, speak up for yourself, your values. You are valuable. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying everybody listening. So thank you for bringing that up first. And then the different mindset changes we can make do follow, and they are so important. But you're right. If you're not going to survive in your position with your income, focus on what's most important.
You can't help anyone. Yeah.
You can't help anyone. So very well said. Thank you. I'm curious, you mentioned in your article, I think, what role technology can play for women.
So burnout often creeps in from decision fatigue and blurred
Mm.
lines.
Mm.
So if you constantly have to enforce rules or negotiate with boundary pushers, and boundary pushers can be patients, staff, vendors, community. I've had my community ask me things because I'm the doctor in a town of 1,500, right?
Mm.
And my community has asked me for things that are not sustainable, that make no financial sense, and that are completely antithetical to the way I practice. I'll give you an example. I've been asked, and they've stopped asking, but when I first opened, almost every year, people would ask me, can you come to the school and do these quick sports physicals for these kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to play sports because, their parents won't take them to go get their sports physical done with their primary care doctor. And of course, I was expected to do this for free because these families were not going to be able to pay, and for me to go to the school and do all of this. And let's say that I suspended the financial, I did it as a community service. It is the complete antithesis of the way I practice. The whole point of opening up a direct primary care practice is I wanted to build these long-term trusting relationships. And so these quick sports physicals were complete. So I've come up with some systems. When you're constantly negotiating boundaries, it's exhausting. It just takes too much emotional labor. So I've learned to set boundaries without having to manually enforce them by implementing systems that do it for me. And, we talked about universally applied rules. These universally applied rules and boundaries are very helpful because they remove the decision-making and emotional burden from having to make it. And so some tools where I've leveraged tech to do this for me. Number one, self-scheduling tools. Oh my goodness. This has been such a game changer because it reduces the back and forth and the emotional labor of scheduling, because unless someone needs stitches, there really is no negotiation. There's no, oh, can you squeeze me in? Because squeezing me in means either taking time from another patient's appointment or infringing on my personal time, right? And instead of trying to do a schedule in real time and this is either me or my team, right? Because it's the same, my team is an extension of myself. By having it done online with a computer, then it takes that emotional part of, oh, can you, but I don't want to miss work, or I don't miss school. This is the schedule, this is the availability. And so it really does take some of that emotional burden with having this online self-scheduling. The other thing that has been a game changer is auto replies that set expectations for response times and my availability. For example, for the last 2 years, my text auto reply states that refill requests will be fulfilled in 48 hours. It also states that if the person texting has a sick or injured child, they can self-schedule an appointment, and the link to do so is right in the text auto reply. And this appointment can be a phone call for medical advice or a telehealth or in clinic. And it really reduces the back and forth texting for issues that need a methodical approach and frees me up to do other things that cannot be automated. And then the third is the collaborative inbox. That has been a game changer also because that prevents my number from becoming a 24/7 hotline. And it also prevents blurring boundaries and settling into a dynamic where, and this happens to women doctors, right? More than male doctors, where, because in direct primary care that we're so accessible, there's so much access. It's very easy for the patients to then see us as a friend because they can text us, they can email us. So I've delegated my team with responding to non-urgent messages. And when we send out pre-scheduled texts, like to follow up after a sick visit or to remind a patient, a parent to complete a pre-visit form, I always sign it Culver Peds team instead of my name. This in no way diminishes the quality of care. They're still getting follow-up. They're still getting, this communication. But it does add a sense of professionalism and conveys the message that communicating with me is not like texting your friend. It is communicating with a professional medical team that is led by me. And then for community requests, I've delegated all that to my team. I no longer respond to requests for sponsorships, or like I mentioned, I've been asked to do things by the community that I felt were inappropriate and probably not something that would have been asked from a male doctor. I just felt that having my team respond sets that boundary that, hey, Dr. Adame is busy and she's a busy professional and access to her isn't a free for all.
Yeah.
That kind of boundary.
Okay. So self-scheduling was a big changer,
Yeah.
auto replies,
Yeah.
and collaborative inboxes is just fascinating because now you're not signing it your name, you're signing it the team.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I imagine your patients are respecting the boundaries more.
Right. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, again, you can take the girl out of academics, but not, the academics out of the girl. So we do utilization reports every year. And what
Mhm.
we found is even this last year, even though we grew by 20%,
Mhm.
our practice grew by 20%, our texts per day remained the same. And that's because
Oh,
we implemented these systems, the self-scheduling, the collaborative inbox, and the text auto reply that said, hey, if your kid is sick, go here. All that really contributed to reducing the back and forth texting, even though we grew.
yeah. So once again, it works for you. You have the data to prove it too,
Yes.
because you
Oh,
studied
yes.
it. I love it.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
This has been a powerful conversation, but before we go, we're going to wrap up in just a minute. Tell us
Mhm.
about, you referred to your women's retreat. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about that. When is the next one? How often do you do it? What's it about?
Yes, this is our first year. I'm so excited
Okay.
about it. It's if anybody can join us, September 4th through 7th, my beautiful little town of Culver, Indiana. We're about 2 hours south of Chicago, 2 hours north of Indy. The purpose is healing the healers to rediscover joy
Mhm.
in personal and professional lives. And it's kind of a hybrid between a holistic healing retreat, because we're going to have yoga, we're going to have
Mhm.
mindfulness activities, we're going to have all meals are whole foods plant-based with gluten-free options. My husband is
Mhm.
a chef and he's going to have cooking demos. We
Oh.
will have a massage therapist for the participants, but it's
Mhm.
also a conference too. We don't have
Mhm.
CME this year, but we hope that for next year, that's going to be the big changes. I want to include CME. And,
Okay.
and so it's going to be like a conference in a way with high quality didactics that address mindset, like we talked about,
Mhm.
leveraging
Mhm.
tech and practical tools to sustain a burnout proof practice. And I'm actually really
Okay.
excited. Dr. Marina Capella, who's one of my favorite people on this planet, she owns Healing Arts Pediatrics in Salt Lake City. She is going to lead a discussion on self hypnosis for wellness. So it's going to be an amazing weekend. So if you can, please join us. The info to register is on the Culver Pediatric Center website.
Oh, thank you. So this is, yeah, for if you're listening later, this is 2025, but
Yeah.
tell us how to get in contact with you. How can people find you and your retreats in the future too?
Yeah, sure. We're very digital and our
Okay.
website is very robust and informative. So www.culverpediatrics.com has info on our practice, on
Mhm.
our services, health and wellness products and books, as well as information on our Physician Women's Retreat. I'm also
Okay.
on LinkedIn, Noemi Adame MD, and on Instagram and Facebook at Culver Peds is our handle for both.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today. I feel like we could talk for another 30, 40, 50 minutes in depth on each of the solutions that you brought to the table. We just didn't have the time to go deep into each one. I appreciate everything you brought today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today to the Inspired Mom MDs podcast. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with a friend who might benefit too. And I'd be so grateful if you left a review so other women can find me too. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and explore free resources at inspiredmommds.com. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for medical advice or care. I'm a board-certified physician, but this content isn't connected to my clinical practice and no doctor-patient relationship is formed here. Please always talk to your own health professional about any mental or physical health concerns. Please see inspiredmommds.com for full disclaimer.